Standing in the heart of a medieval city, you're surrounded by two worlds, one reaching for the heavens, the other burrowing deep into the earth. Above you, the stone fingers of a cathedral stretch toward the clouds, a testament to human ambition and divine inspiration. Below your feet, hidden from sight, a maze of tunnels winds through the darkness, carved by hands just as skilled and determined. These two landscapes, one soaring, one subterranean, were shaped by rival craftsmen whose fierce competition and unexpected collaborations forever changed the face of urban life. This is the story of the cathedral builders and the tunnel diggers, the unsung heroes who transformed medieval cities into marvels of engineering and artistry. Picture the scene, a bustling market square, alive with the clang of hammers and the shouts of laborers. On one side, stonemasons hoist blocks of limestone, piecing together arches that seem to defy gravity. On the other, miners emerge from the depths, their faces smudged with dirt, having spent hours reinforcing underground passages that crisscross beneath the streets. These craftsmen might have worked in different realms, but their fates were intertwined. Every cathedral's foundation relied on the stability of the earth beneath it, and every tunnel's route was shaped by the structures above. Their rivalry wasn't just about skill, it was a battle for dominance over the city itself, a clash of visions that pushed both groups to innovate in ways no one had imagined. What makes their story so captivating isn't just the scale of their achievements, but the humanity behind them. These weren't anonymous laborers, they were master craftsmen, each with their own traditions, secrets, and pride. The cathedral builders, with their intricate stained glass and vaulted ceilings, sought to create monuments that would inspire awe for centuries. The tunnel diggers, meanwhile, worked in shadows, crafting passages for water, trade, and even defense, their ingenuity often overlooked but no less vital. Together, their rivalry sparked a revolution in how cities were built, leaving behind a legacy that still shapes our world today. So let's step into their shoes, uncover their secrets, and discover how these medieval rivals transformed the very ground beneath our feet. The cathedral builders didn't just construct buildings, they defied gravity itself. With every soaring spire and delicate stained glass window, they turned stone into poetry, bending the laws of physics to create spaces that felt touched by the divine. Their secret, innovations like the flying buttress, which acted like invisible hands cradling the walls, allowing them to rise higher than ever before. Ribbed vaults distributed weight with precision, making ceilings seem to float overhead. These weren't just technical breakthroughs, they were declarations of human ingenuity, proof that faith and ambition could reshape the skyline. But the true genius of these craftsmen lay in their ability to blend art and engineering. Take Chartres Cathedral, where every sculpture and pane of glass told a biblical story, turning the entire structure into a sermon in stone. Or the labyrinthine floor of Reims Cathedral, designed to mimic a spiritual journey. These weren't mere decorations, they were tools of devotion, meant to elevate the soul as much as the eye. And as pilgrims flocked to these marvels, the cathedrals became economic engines, their grandeur attracting merchants, scholars, and wealth that transformed sleepy towns into bustling hubs of medieval life. Yet for all their glory, the cathedral builders faced a silent rival, one that worked not in sunlight but in shadow. While they reached for the heavens, another group of craftsmen was mastering the earth beneath them. The tunnel diggers, often dismissed as mere laborers, were quietly solving problems just as complex. How to channel water through a growing city, how to carve stable passages beneath crowded streets, even how to hide entire networks for defense or smuggling. Their work was less visible but no less revolutionary, and as cathedrals rose higher, the diggers burrowed deeper, their rivalry setting the stage for a clash that would redefine the medieval city from the ground up. While the cathedral builders worked in the spotlight, the tunnel diggers mastered the art of invisibility. Their world was one of flickering torchlight and echoing pickaxes, where every inch of progress came with the risk of collapse or suffocation. Yet without their hidden handiwork, medieval cities would have drowned in their own waste or crumbled under the weight of unchecked groundwater. These underground artisans didn't just dig, they engineered solutions to problems no one wanted to see. Take Paris, where a labyrinth of tunnels originally quarried for limestone later became the city's skeletal support system, channeling wastewater away from streets and preventing epidemics. Or consider the ingenious qanats of medieval Cordoba, where Persian-inspired underground canals brought fresh water to arid neighborhoods, turning the city into an oasis. What set the tunnel diggers apart wasn't just their tolerance for darkness, it was their intimate understanding of the earth itself. While cathedral builders wrestled stone into the sky, diggers had to predict how soil would settle, where water would flow, and how to reinforce walls so they wouldn't buckle under the weight of a bustling city above. Their tools were simpler, picks, shovels, and wooden supports, but their knowledge was profound. Some even became early geologists, reading layers of sediment like pages in a book. In places like Edinburgh, where volcanic rock made tunneling treacherous, they developed techniques so advanced that centuries later, their passages still stand intact beneath modern streets. The rivalry between these two groups wasn't just about skill, it was a battle for the city's soul. Cathedral builders dismissed tunnelers as grubby laborers, while diggers scoffed at the extravagance of towering spires when basic sanitation went ignored. Yet their competition fueled progress. When a cathedral's foundation threatened to destabilize a tunnel network, both sides were forced to collaborate, sharing knowledge that advanced engineering for generations. In places like Vienna, this uneasy partnership gave rise to hybrid marvels, catacombs that doubled as flood control systems, or crypts with ventilation shafts disguised as decorative turrets. The diggers might have worked in shadows, but their legacy was anything but invisible. Every time a medieval city thrived instead of faltering, it was their hands, calloused and unseen, that held it together from below. The struggle between cathedral builders and tunnel diggers wasn't just a technical debate. It was a philosophical divide that shaped the very blueprint of medieval cities. On one side, the master masons dreamed of sweeping plazas and unobstructed vistas, their cathedrals demanding space to breathe and dominate the skyline. Every open square around these monuments was carefully calculated, not just for grandeur but for practical crowds of pilgrims who needed room to gather. Yet beneath their feet, the tunnel diggers had a very different vision. Their work required discrete access points, ventilation shafts, and routes that often cut directly under those same sacred spaces. Imagine the frustration. A mason's perfect plaza suddenly interrupted by a grate leading to the underworld, or a delicate stained glass window's foundation compromised by an unexpected hollow beneath. City leaders found themselves torn between these competing worlds. In places like Cologne, where the cathedral's construction spanned centuries, the clash became painfully clear. Diggers carving out cellar networks for wine merchants inadvertently weakened the ground beneath the church's rising towers, forcing costly delays. Meanwhile, in Siena, the famed Piazza del Campo's elegant slope, designed to showcase the Palazzo Pubblico, had to be carefully engineered to avoid collapsing into ancient Etruscan tunnels below. These weren't just engineering challenges, they were power struggles. Bishops and nobles, dazzled by the celestial promise of cathedrals, often sidelined the diggers' concerns, until a collapsed sewer or flooded crypt proved how vital those hidden systems really were. What's fascinating is how this tension sparked unexpected compromises. In York, where Viking-era tunnels snaked beneath the minster, architects devised a brilliant solution. They built the cathedral's foundations like a stone raft, distributing its weight evenly over the unstable ground. Over in Bruges, tunnel diggers were given designated routes under market squares, but only if their shafts were disguised as decorative fountains or wells, blending utility with beauty. Even the language of contracts reveals this delicate balance. One 14th century agreement from Florence specifies that masons must consult the men of the underground before laying a single stone, proving that practicality sometimes triumphed over pride. The real winners in this rivalry, the cities themselves, forced to mediate between earth and sky, they became laboratories of innovation. Strasbourg's network of covered canals, for instance, served double duty, draining stormwater while secretly supplying builders with sand and gravel transported beneath streets. In Prague, the Charles Bridge's iconic towers weren't just defensive. Their hollow bases hid staircases to riverbank tunnels used during sieges. This push and pull between visibility and invisibility, between aspiration and necessity, gave medieval urban planning its distinctive layered genius. The next time you stroll through an old European square, remember, what you see is only half the story. Beneath your feet, the ghosts of tunnel diggers and cathedral builders are still negotiating. The competition between cathedral builders and tunnel diggers wasn't just about stone and soil, it was a battle for the hands that shaped them. Skilled craftsmen were the lifeblood of both trades, and as medieval cities expanded, the demand for their expertise turned into an all-out labor war. Guilds, those powerful medieval unions, became the front line in this struggle. For stonemasons, joining a guild meant protection, fixed wages, strict quality standards, even pensions for injured workers. But for tunnel diggers, often seen as lower-class laborers, guild recognition was harder won. Their work might have been dirty, but it required precision and risk that few could match. When a cathedral's foundation cracked because of shoddy tunneling, or a sewer collapsed under the weight of a new chapel, both sides quickly learned just how much they needed each other's skills. Wages became a flashpoint. In cities like Strasbourg, records show stonemasons earning nearly double what tunnel diggers made for similarly perilous work. Resentment festered. Some diggers began moonlighting for cathedral projects, lured by higher pay, while masons accused them of undercutting guild rates. The tension boiled over in places like 14th century Ghent, where a tunneler's guild famously sabotaged a cathedral construction site by secretly diverting groundwater into freshly dug foundations. The bishop responded by hiring armed guards to patrol the works not against thieves, but against rival craftsmen. Yet these conflicts had an unexpected upside. They forced both sides to innovate. When diggers withheld labor, cathedral builders experimented with new foundation techniques. When masons hoarded tools, tunnelers improvised with reinforced wooden supports that later became industry standards. The guilds themselves became arenas for this rivalry. In Florence, the stonemasons' guild hall displayed intricate models of their finest arches, a silent challenge to the tunnelers' more utilitarian achievements. But underground, the diggers had their own boasts, carvings hidden in tunnel walls depicting feats of engineering, signed by crews who knew their work would outlast the grandest spires. What's remarkable is how this competition elevated both trades. By the late Middle Ages, master diggers in places like Nuremberg could command wages rivaling those of cathedral sculptors, their knowledge of hydraulics and soil mechanics now recognized as irreplaceable. The lesson was clear: whether working in sunlight or shadow, skill deserved respect, and as cities grew more complex, the line between high and low craftsmanship began to blur, one sturdy tunnel at a time. The relentless competition between cathedral builders and tunnel diggers didn't just shape cities, it rewrote the rules of medieval engineering. Each group's obsession with outdoing the other sparked innovations that seem impossible for their time. Take the quest for height. As masons raced to build ever taller spires, they faced a crisis. Traditional stone was too heavy, threatening to buckle under its own weight. The solution, a revolution in materials. By mixing volcanic ash from distant quarries into their mortar, they created a lighter, stronger concrete that could support dizzying heights. Over in Canterbury, craftsmen experimented with hollowed-out stone blocks, reducing weight without sacrificing strength. These weren't just tweaks, they were leaps forward, born from the pressure to surpass rivals working underground. Meanwhile, the tunnel diggers faced their own life-or-death challenges. Every foot they carved into unstable earth risked catastrophe. A single collapse could bury a crew alive, until they pioneered shoring techniques still used today. In the claustrophobic darkness beneath cities like Lübeck, they developed interlocking wooden braces that acted like shock absorbers, flexing with shifting soil rather than snapping. Some crews even invented early surveying tools, using dripping water to gauge slopes and prevent tunnels from flooding, their most ingenious breakthrough. The polling plate method, where workers advanced inch by inch behind movable shields, a technique so effective it was later adapted for modern subway systems. What's astonishing is how these rival innovations secretly fed each other. When cathedral builders in charters needed deeper foundations, they hired tunnel diggers to shore up the trenches, only to steal their cribbing designs for above-ground buttresses. In return, diggers repurposed masons' precise measuring tools to map underground routes with unprecedented accuracy. This back and forth birthed hybrid marvels like the stepped wells of medieval India, where staircases descending to water reservoirs mirrored the inverted arches supporting cathedral naves. Even failures became lessons. When a tunnel collapse under Paris's Notre Dame revealed unstable bedrock, builders adjusted their plans, creating the iconic flying buttresses that saved the sinking structure. The legacy of this rivalry echoes in every modern city. Skyscrapers owe their skeletons to medieval masons' experiments with load distribution, while subway tunnels still rely on principles pioneered by those shadowy diggers. Perhaps the greatest testament to their competition lies in places like Vienna, where St. Stephen's Cathedral and the ancient sewer system beneath it were built concurrently, each pushing the other to new heights and depths. The next time you marvel at a soaring glass tower or ride a train through a tunnel, remember, you're witnessing the latest chapter in a battle that began centuries ago, when two groups of craftsmen refused to let the other have the final word. Cathedrals and tunnels represented two sides of the medieval soul, one reaching toward eternity, the other rooted in the grit of daily life. Those towering spires weren't just buildings, they were prayers carved in stone, their every detail dripping with symbolism. Take the rose windows of Notre Dame, designed to catch sunlight and scatter it like divine grace across the nave, or the labyrinthine floors pilgrims walked on their knees, mirroring the winding path to salvation. Even the cathedral's layout echoed the cross, turning architecture into theology. These weren't just structures, they were maps of heaven itself, designed to lift the eyes and hearts of every passerby toward the divine. Yet beneath this celestial spectacle, the tunnel diggers were solving problems far more immediate. While bishops debated stained glass designs, these craftsmen wrestled with raw sewage pooling in streets or enemy armies breaching city walls. Their work lacked grandeur but brimmed with urgency. In places like London, the Great Conduit, a sprawling tunnel system, delivered fresh water to public fountains, preventing thirst and disease. Beneath Italian hill towns, hidden escape routes saved lives during sieges, their entrances disguised as wine cellars or chapels. Where cathedrals spoke of the next world, tunnels whispered the harsh truths of this one. Survival demanded more than faith alone. What's fascinating is how these opposing forces shaped each other. In Prague, the cathedral's crypt doubled as a cistern during droughts, blending spiritual space with civic utility. Over in Toledo, Jewish and Muslim tunnel engineers often excluded from cathedral projects designed underground water systems so ingenious they were later blessed by bishops. Even the humblest sewer grate could carry symbolism. Some were cast with religious motifs, turning necessity into devotion. This interplay created cities that thrived in both body and soul. A marketplace might host sermons under cathedral shadows by day, while beneath it, tunnels carried away the waste that could have sparked plague. The true genius of medieval urban planning lay in this duality. Cathedrals drew pilgrims whose donations funded tunnel repairs. Clean streets from those tunnels made cathedral squares hospitable for crowds. Spiritual and practical needs weren't rivals, they were partners in a delicate dance. When Milan's cathedral builders discovered ancient Roman sewers beneath their site, they didn't demolish them. They built around them, grafting divine ambition onto earthly wisdom. That's the lesson etched into every stone and tunnel. A city soars highest when its foundations are as solid as its aspirations. Paris stood as the ultimate battleground between heaven and earth, where the clash between cathedral builders and tunnel diggers played out in stone and bone. As Notre Dame's towers rose toward the sky, their shadow fell upon a city literally hollowed out from below. The same limestone that formed the cathedral's luminous facade was wrested from tunnels beneath the streets, creating a paradox. Every block of stone lifted toward the heavens left behind an empty space in the dark. These quarries, stretching for miles beneath the city, became the unsung foundation of Paris's grandeur, both its glory and its peril. The scale of this underground empire was staggering. By the 14th century, miners had carved out enough stone to build 10 Notre Dames, leaving behind a labyrinth so vast that entire neighborhoods stood atop voids. When heavy rains or construction weakened the ground, streets would suddenly collapse, swallowing carts and buildings whole. The city's solution, an army of tunnel diggers turned engineers, shoring up cavities with arches mirroring those of the cathedrals above. Their work was invisible but indispensable, like stagehands holding up a play's dazzling set. Then came the macabre twist. As cemeteries overflowed in the 18th century, Paris faced a grisly crisis. The solution lay in those abandoned quarries. Tunnel diggers, now moonlighting as bone movers, spent years relocating 6 million skeletons into carefully arranged catacombs beneath the city. What began as a practical fix became a haunting mirror to Notre Dame's splendor. Above ground, light streamed through stained glass, illuminating biblical scenes. Below, skulls lined damp tunnels in eerie patterns, their empty sockets staring back at visitors. The same hands that shaped soaring vaults also stacked femurs with chilling precision. This duality transformed Paris into a living metaphor. While Notre Dame's spire claimed to touch the divine, the catacombs whispered of mortality. Pilgrims climbing the cathedral's towers for transcendent views could unknowingly stand atop galleries filled with remains. The rivalry between builders and diggers had birthed something profound, a city where beauty and decay, ambition and practicality existed in relentless dialogue. Even today, when engineers inject concrete into ancient quarries to stabilize modern buildings, they're continuing a medieval dance between what rises and what lies beneath. London's transformation from medieval maze to modern metropolis hinged on an unlikely battleground, the Fleet River. Once a vital waterway threading through the city, by the 17th century it had become an open sewer, choked with waste from tanneries and slaughterhouses. The stench was so notorious that poets called it the Valley of the Shadow of Death. But where others saw only filth, London's tunnel diggers saw opportunity. Their solution: bury the fleet alive. Brick by brick, they constructed a colossal underground channel, turning the river into the spine of a revolutionary sewer system. Above them, Christopher Wren's St. Paul's Cathedral rose in gleaming limestone, its dome a symbol of resurrection after the Great Fire. Together, these projects embodied London's twin obsessions, reaching for the divine while wrestling with the muck of daily life. The engineering behind the Fleet Sewer was as audacious as any cathedral vault. Diggers worked in shifts around the clock, navigating quicks and like soil that threatened to collapse at any moment. Their secret weapon, a technique called perpendicular sinking, where they built the sewer's walls downward in stages, like lowering a giant box into the earth. Every brick was laid with precision, not for beauty, but to withstand the relentless pressure of waste and groundwater. Meanwhile, just half a mile away, stonemasons at St. Paul's faced their own crisis. The cathedral's foundation kept flooding, thanks to the same waterlogged soil that plagued the tunnelers. In a rare moment of cooperation, the two groups shared knowledge. Diggers taught masons how to divert underground streams, while masons lent their expertise in load-bearing arches to reinforce sewer walls. What made this rivalry so pivotal was its impact beyond construction sites. The Fleet Sewer became a blueprint for public health, proving that cities could engineer their way out of disease. Before its completion, cholera outbreaks regularly killed thousands. Afterward, deaths plummeted. St. Paul's, meanwhile, became a symbol of resilience, its dome visible for miles, a beacon of hope above a city literally cleaning up its act. The contrast was stark but complementary. Where the cathedral inspired with light and space, the sewers worked in darkness, their success measured in lives saved rather than souls stirred. London's story reveals the hidden symmetry between these rival crafts. Both projects required staggering manpower. St. Paul's employed over 3,000 workers at its peak, while the Fleet Sewer crews numbered in the hundreds. Both faced public skepticism. Critics called Wren's dome a monstrous carbuncle, while others feared burying rivers would anger the water spirits, yet both triumphed through sheer ingenuity. The sewer's success even inspired a new generation of undrowned architects who realized that mastering the unseen, whether pipes or foundations, was just as vital as crafting the visible. The legacy of this duality still pulses through London today. Walk along Farringdon Road and you're strolling atop the Fleet's brick coffin. Gaze up at St. Paul's and you see the same dome that once dominated a skyline of chimneys and slums. Together, they remind us that great cities aren't built on cathedrals or sewers alone, but on the tension between them, the constant negotiation between soaring dreams and grounded necessity. Behind every soaring cathedral and hidden tunnel lay a question more powerful than any chisel or pick: who would pay for it? The rivalry between craftsmen wasn't just about skill. It was a battle for patronage where kings and bishops held the keys to fortune. Cathedral builders knelt before bishops, their blueprints unfurled like sacred texts, promising monuments to glorify God and the church's influence. A single commission could sustain a guild for decades, but the price was steep. Bishops demanded not just beauty, but speed, insisting projects align with religious festivals or papal visits. In Chartres, when fire destroyed the old cathedral in 1194, the local bishop turned tragedy into spectacle, displaying the surviving relic, a piece of the Virgin Mary's veil, to inspire donations. Pilgrims flocked, coins flowed, and within a generation, a new cathedral rose, its stained glass telling the story of the very miracle that funded it. Yet underground, a different kind of patron lurked. Kings and city councils cared less about celestial grandeur than earthly survival. When Philip Augustus ordered Paris's streets paved in the 12th century, it wasn't for beauty, it was to prevent waste from seeping into cellars during rains. His real masterstroke, funding tunnels to divert the foul runoff into the Seine, a project so vital that diggers were exempted from taxes. Across Europe, defensive tunnels became royal obsessions. Beneath Edinburgh Castle, miners carved secret escape routes for besieged monarchs, while in Carcassonne, the crown paid tunnelers triple wages to reinforce subterranean stores against sieges. These weren't acts of piety, but cold calculation. A city that couldn't withstand attack was worthless, no matter how glorious its spires. The most cunning craftsmen learned to play both sides. Take Henry Yeovil, England's master mason, who designed Canterbury Cathedral's nave while simultaneously fortifying the Tower of London's underground passages. His genius lay in speaking two languages, the bishop's Latin of divine proportions and the king's French of siege logistics. Others weren't so adaptable. When the Bishop of Siena hired tunnel diggers to expand his cathedral's crypt, he balked at their ungodly fees, only to watch his prized nave crack as groundwater seeped through shoddy work. The lesson: even men of God needed earthy pragmatism. Patronage also bred intrigue. In Florence, the Wool Merchants' Guild, wealthier than the local bishop, funded both the cathedral's dome and the tunnels beneath their warehouses, pitting craftsmen against each other to drive down costs. The winner, Filippo Brunelleschi, who leveraged his tunnel-digging knowledge to invent hoists that lifted dome stones higher than ever before. Meanwhile, in Prague, Emperor Charles Roman IV played a double game, commissioning the soaring St. Vitus Cathedral while secretly hiring the same diggers to hollow out a labyrinth beneath the castle, one part treasury, one part prison. His message was clear: heaven and power shared the same foundations. What emerges from these tangled alliances is a truth as solid as the stones they worked. The greatest medieval cities weren't shaped by craftsmen alone, but by the delicate dance between those who dug, those who built, and those who paid. Whether with a bishop's blessing or a king's coin, patronage dictated which visions rose skyward and which vanished into the dark, proving that even in the Middle Ages, art and ambition always had a price. Beneath the sacred stones of medieval cities lay a shadowy world of whispered secrets and stolen moments. While cathedral builders crafted their masterpieces in full view of the public, tunnel diggers operated in a realm where light was scarce and trust scarcer. These underground passages became the perfect stage for espionage, hidden corridors where spies could move unseen, where messages could be exchanged without prying eyes, where the fate of kingdoms sometimes hinged on a single concealed staircase. In places like the Château de Chinon, secret tunnels allowed French royalty to escape assassins, while beneath Edinburgh's Royal Mile, narrow passageways let informants slip between taverns and noble houses, trading secrets like currency. The true power of these tunnels wasn't just in their construction, it was in their silence. Unlike the ringing hammers of cathedral sites, underground work demanded stealth. Diggers developed coded knocks to warn of approaching guards, and some tunnels featured whispering galleries where voices carried unnaturally far, perfect for overhearing plots. In Venice, the notorious Council of Ten used a network of hidden passages to spy on suspected traitors, their walls lined with slits for observing prisoners in adjacent cells. Even the tools of the trade were adapted for secrecy. Narrow, spade picks made less noise, and lanterns were fitted with shutters to control light leaks that might betray a tunnel's location. What cathedral builders flaunted, tunnel diggers concealed. While masons signed their work proudly on gargoyles and buttresses, diggers left their marks in invisible places, a coded symbol etched behind a brick, a distinctive pattern in the mortar. Some tunnels held treasures beyond imagination. Beneath Prague Castle, a sealed chamber discovered in the 20th century contained gold coins and jewels hidden during the Hussite Wars. Other passageways served as makeshift banks. Merchants in Genoa used them to store bullion during pirate raids, trusting the earth's secrecy more than any vault. The rivalry between these two worlds reached its peak when their purposes collided. In 13th century Toledo, cathedral builders accidentally broke into a Moorish-era escape tunnel during construction. What they found shocked them, not just an empty passage, but a meticulously mapped network leading beyond the city walls, complete with stocked weapon caches and fresh water reserves. The discovery forced an uneasy collaboration. Diggers were hired to reinforce the tunnels for Christian use, while masons worked above ground to disguise the entrances as decorative shrines. It was a grudging acknowledgement that even the grandest cathedrals stood atop someone else's secrets. This hidden dimension gave tunnel diggers a unique leverage. While stonemasons relied on public admiration for their craft, diggers traded in something more potent: information. Those who knew a city's underground veins could name their price, whether it was a king paying to expand his escape routes or a merchant bribing diggers to connect his cellar to the waterfront. In York, rumors persist of a tunnel guild that kept forbidden knowledge which passages led to the river, which could collapse on command, selling access only to those who swore blood oaths. Whether myth or truth, the stories reveal a universal truth. In the Middle Ages, control of the underground meant control of power itself. The legacy of these shadowed corridors lingers in modern intrigue. When engineers recently uncovered a forgotten tunnel beneath Westminster Abbey, they found not just stones and dirt, but candle stubs and a rusted dagger, silent witnesses to meetings that history never recorded. It's a reminder that for every soaring cathedral drawing the eye upward, there were always those who mastered the art of vanishing below, turning the earth itself into a weapon, a sanctuary, and a vault of secrets too potent for daylight. The soaring ambition of medieval cathedral builders didn't vanish with the Middle Ages. It evolved, their stone-bound genius echoing through the steel and glass of modern skyscrapers. Those ribbed vaults and flying buttresses weren't just solutions to medieval problems. They were prototypes for principles that define cities today. Take the concept of verticality. When builders like those at Beauvise Cathedral pushed heights to their limits, risking collapses that now seem reckless, they were laying groundwork for a future obsession with reaching skyward. Centuries later, when architects like Louis Sullivan designed early skyscrapers, they turned to Gothic cathedrals for inspiration, realizing those medieval masters had already solved the psychological challenge of making immense structures feel uplifting rather than oppressive. The Chrysler Building spire, a direct descendant of Strasbourg Cathedral's lace-like tower, both designed to draw the eye upward in awe. Material innovation tells a similar story. Medieval masons experimenting with thinner walls and lighter stones stumbled upon truths that still guide engineers. Chartres Cathedral's use of iron reinforcements within its stonework marked one of the first times metal was embedded to counteract tension, a principle now fundamental in reinforced concrete. Even the stained glass windows, those kaleidoscopic walls of light, find their echo in modern curtain walls. The difference, instead of biblical scenes, today's glass facades reflect clouds, but the goal remains the same: to dissolve barriers between interior and exterior, making weighty structures feel ethereal. Perhaps the most enduring legacy lies in how cathedrals taught builders to manipulate perception. The nave of Amiens Cathedral uses forced perspective columns subtly narrowing as they rise, shape to appear even longer than it is, a trick later adopted by everything from Baroque palaces to Manhattan's slender skyscrapers. Even the humble gargoyle, originally a practical waterspout, evolved into modern rain screen systems that protect facades while adding artistry. The lesson: medieval builders understood that function alone wasn't enough. Architecture had to stir the soul. What's remarkable is how these innovations crossed continents and cultures. When Catalan architect Antoni Gaudí designed Barcelona's Sagrada Familia, he didn't just mimic Gothic style, he reverse-engineered its principles. His hanging chain models, used to calculate perfect arch distributions, mirrored medieval masons' rope and sandbag experiments. Across the Atlantic, the neo-Gothic towers of Chicago and New York paid homage to European cathedrals while adapting their lessons for steel skeletons. Even earthquake-resistant buildings owe a debt. The same flexibility medieval builders engineered into cathedral walls to withstand wind loads now helps towers ride out seismic waves. The true testament to these craftsmen's foresight: their ideas thrive in places they never imagined. Suspension bridges use cable patterns inspired by vaulted ceilings. Airport terminals echo the vast, light-filled spans of cathedral naves, and when engineers today face unprecedented challenges, like building in hurricane zones or on unstable ground, they often return to those ancient manuscripts, discovering that the solutions they seek were sketched in the margins of parchment centuries ago. The cathedral builders may have worked in stone, but their real material was time itself, crafting ideas so resilient they'd outlast empires. The medieval tunnel diggers who toiled in darkness beneath cities would hardly recognize the skyscrapers above modern streets, but they'd instantly understand the intricate webs of tunnels supporting them. Those unheralded craftsmen didn't just solve immediate problems like sewage and flooding. They invented techniques that became the DNA of contemporary urban life. Consider London's Metropolitan Railway. The world's first subway system opened in 1863. Its construction crews faced nearly identical challenges to their medieval predecessors: unstable soil, groundwater seepage, and the terrifying risk of collapse. Their solution, adapting the polling plate method pioneered by 14th century diggers in Paris, advancing inch by inch behind movable wooden shields that held back the earth. Even the iconic tube shape of modern subway tunnels owes its existence to medieval vaulting techniques, originally designed to distribute pressure in catacombs and wine cellars. Water management reveals an even clearer lineage. The Qanat system's medieval diggers borrowed from Persia gravity-fed underground channels that transported water across arid regions, evolved into the vast utility tunnels beneath cities like New York and Tokyo. Modern engineers still employ the same principle of gentle slopes and ventilation shafts that prevented stagnation centuries ago. In Amsterdam, where groundwater control is existential, contemporary pumps work in tandem with medieval-style drainage canals, their designs refined from sketches found in 16th century diggers' guild records. Even Boston's infamous Big Dig project, which rerouted an entire highway underground, relied on reinforcement methods tested in the tunnels beneath medieval Bologna, where alternating layers of brick and rubble absorbed seismic shocks like a subterranean shock absorber. The true measure of these diggers' genius lies in their foresight. When they carved out crypts beneath churches or escape routes under castles, they were thinking decades, not centuries, ahead. Yet their work proved astonishingly durable. The vaulted sewers beneath Vienna, built in the 1300s, still handle storm runoff today. Edinburgh's hidden passages, once escape routes for besieged royals, now form part of the city's electrical grid. Perhaps most poetic is how their innovations circled back to sacred spaces. When engineers stabilized Mexico City's sinking Metropolitan Cathedral in the 1990s, They used a technique inspired by medieval tunnelers injecting limestone slurry beneath the foundation, just as diggers had done to shore up shaky ground under French abbeys. What medieval craftsmen couldn't anticipate was how their solutions would scale. Where they braced tunnels with oak beams, we used steel ribs. Where they mapped by candlelight, we deploy LiDAR scans. Yet the core challenges remain unchanged: how to navigate unseen geology, how to balance human ambition with the Earth's resistance. Every time a boring machine chews through bedrock for a new subway line or a microtunnel drills beneath a skyscraper's foundation, it's continuing a conversation started by those soot-faced diggers, one that proves the most enduring urban innovations aren't always the ones that glitter in sunlight, but those that hold firm in the dark. The rivalry between cathedral builders and tunnel diggers wasn't just a race for glory. It was a high-stakes gamble where the price of failure could be measured in lives. In 1284, the towering vaults of Beauvise Cathedral, then the tallest in Europe, came crashing down during a storm. The cause, builders, desperate to outdo rivals in Amiens, had pushed height to reckless extremes, ignoring warnings from tunnel diggers about unstable subsoil. The collapse wasn't just a blow to pride. It bankrupted the diocese and left the cathedral unfinished for centuries, its broken ribs of stone a stark lesson in the dangers of unchecked ambition. Yet from this disaster emerged a revolution in engineering. Surviving masons studied the wreckage, realizing that flying buttresses needed to be not just strong, but flexible, able to sway slightly under wind loads like trees in a storm. This hard-won insight would later save countless Gothic structures across Europe. Underground, the risks were even deadlier. In 1406, a tunnel collapsed beneath the Swiss city of Bern, buried an entire crew alive when diggers, racing to expand the city's granary cellars, ignored signs of crumbling sandstone. The tragedy forced a reckoning. Within months, Bern's guilds drafted the first known tunneling safety codes requiring timber shoring every 10 feet and mandating inspections by candlelight. If the flame flickered unnaturally, it signaled dangerous air pockets. These rules spread across Europe, turning haphazard digging into a disciplined science. The irony, many techniques were borrowed from cathedral builders who'd perfected temporary supports for vault construction. Yet competition could also spark miraculous recoveries. When fire ravaged Reims Cathedral in 1481, destroying its roof and melting lead from stained glass, rival masons from across France rallied to rebuild. The race to restore the crowning site of French kings became a testing ground for innovations. Fire-resistant slate roofing, iron-reinforced tracery, even early forms of prefabrication where stone elements were carved off-site. Similarly, after floods collapsed half of Venice's underground cistern network in 1522, tunnelers from rival cities pooled knowledge, inventing waterproof mortar by mixing volcanic ash from distant Etna. These collaborations, born of crisis, advanced both crafts more than decades of solo work ever could. The most profound lesson lay in how failures forced rivals to listen to one another. When Winchester Cathedral's foundation began sinking into marshy ground in the early 14th century, its builders initially dismissed local well diggers' advice. But as the walls cracked beyond denial, they swallowed their pride and hired the very men they'd scorned. The solution: a floating raft of oak logs and crushed brick, a technique well diggers used to stabilize water shafts. It worked so well that the method was later adapted for Venice's palaces and Amsterdam's canal houses. This push and pull between disaster and ingenuity defined medieval urban progress. Every collapsed tunnel taught diggers about soil mechanics. Every cracked cathedral revealed new truths about load distribution. The rivalry's true legacy wasn't just the triumphs that still awe us today, but the failures that forced these craftsmen to look beyond competition, and recognized that their greatest breakthroughs came when they dared to learn from each other's mistakes. High on cathedral scaffolds, a misstep could mean plummeting 100 feet onto unforgiving stone. Below ground, a single breath might draw in deadly pockets of trapped gas instead of air. The rivalry between these craftsmen wasn't just about skill, it was a daily gamble with mortality. Cathedral builders dangled from ropes without harnesses, carving intricate gargoyles while winds whipped at their backs. Records from York Minster tell of a mason who survived a fall from the central tower, only to return to work the next day with broken ribs, his hands too valuable to rest. Meanwhile, tunnel diggers faced horrors even seasoned miners feared. In the claustrophobic darkness beneath Norwich, crews worked knee-deep in icy groundwater, their candles snuffing out when oxygen grew thin, a silent warning many ignored until collapsing tunnels buried them alive. The toll wasn't just physical. Guild ledgers reveal haunting details, payments to widows, bonuses for high-risk crest work, even contracts requiring diggers to swear they wouldn't flee if a tunnel began collapsing. At Strasbourg Cathedral, an anonymous mason carved a plea into a hidden beam. "God forgive us our pride," a stark contrast to the triumphant spires above. These weren't just workers, they were fathers, sons, and sometimes child laborers. In the quarry tunnels beneath Paris, archaeologists found small shoes preserved in ochre clay, evidence of boys as young as 8 hauling stones through passages barely 3 feet tall. Yet within this brutality lay unexpected solidarity. When a tunnel collapse trapped 15 diggers beneath Vienna in 1382, cathedral masons volunteered their pulley systems to help lift debris, working alongside rivals for 3 sleepless days. In reverse, diggers often shared their hard-won knowledge of groundwater patterns to prevent cathedral foundations from flooding. The rivalry that fueled innovation also forged grudging respect. Both sides understood that every milestone, whether a spire's apex or a tunnel's breakthrough, came drenched in shared sweat and sacrifice. What's often forgotten is how these laborers shaped the very concept of workers' rights. After a catastrophic collapse at Canterbury Cathedral's crypt killed 12 diggers in 1311, the survivors staged one of medieval Europe's first recorded labor strikes. Their demand, safer working conditions and hazard pay. The bishop, desperate to complete the pilgrimage site, agreed, setting a precedent that rippled across guilds for centuries. Similarly, tunnel diggers in Ghent formed clandestine brotherhoods of the pick to negotiate wages, using their irreplaceable skills as leverage. The true cost of these medieval marvels wasn't measured in gold or stone, but in the calloused hands that shaped them. Every flying buttress owes its curve to some nameless mason who balanced on wooden platforms without railings. Every dry cellar in Bruges exists because diggers risked drowning in collapsed trenches. Their legacy isn't just in the structures that survived, but in the unspoken truth they revealed. Progress has always demanded both vision and sacrifice, with the greatest cities standing as monuments to those who built them from the shadows up. History remembers the master masons and the burly tunnel diggers' names like Villard de Honnecourt or the legendary Jean the Miner, etched into guild records. But behind these celebrated craftsmen stood women whose contributions were just as vital, even if their stories were rarely written in stone. While guild membership rolls listed mostly men, medieval cities thrived because of the invisible labor of wives, daughters, and widows who kept construction moving. Picture the scene. As stonemasons shaped blocks at cathedral sites, women mixed mortar in vast troughs, their recipes often handed down through generations, determining whether a wall would stand for centuries or crumble in decades. In the tunnels beneath cities like Bruges, they hauled baskets of excavated earth up narrow shafts, their skirts caked in mud while above ground. Others managed the intricate logistics of feeding and housing hundreds of laborers. Financial records reveal an even more surprising truth. Wealthy widows frequently bankrolled projects when male patrons wavered. Take Alex de Vergy, who in 1281 single-handedly funded the completion of Dijon's Notre Dame after her merchant husband's death, insisting the spire reach such height as to shame the men who doubted. In London, the silk merchant Alice Wade left detailed instructions in her will for the tunnel connecting her wharf to the Thames, specifying the exact width needed for 2 barrels to pass side by side, proving her technical knowledge rivaled any guild engineers. These women weren't just passive benefactors, they were savvy project managers who dictated timelines, materials, even architectural tweaks. Some left physical marks on the structures themselves. At Exeter Cathedral, a small but deliberate carving of a woman holding a compass and square hides near the choir stalls likely a tribute to Catherine of Ledbury, the bishop's sister who supervised the rebuilding campaign after the original tower collapsed. In Germany's Quedlinburg Abbey, the unusual helical staircase, a marvel of medieval engineering, bears the faint inscription, "Ut me fecit, ut made me," suggesting the abbess herself contributed to its design. Even more revealing are the countless witch marks found in timber framing across Europe, protective symbols carved primarily by women believed to ward off structural fires and collapses, blending superstition with a deep understanding of material vulnerabilities. The tunnel diggers' world held similar secrets. While guild statutes barred women from official membership, city accounts list payments to the widow fare and for shoring up Norwich's underground grain stores, and Margot the Miner for leading an emergency crew to repair collapsed sewers in 14th century Paris. Their expertise often came from necessity. Many inherited their husbands' trades after plagues or accidents, mastering the work through sheer survival instinct. In the limestone quarries beneath Provence, archaeologists found small shoes and tools sized for women's hands, suggesting entire families worked underground, passing techniques orally outside formal guild structures. Why does this matter? Because the rivalry between cathedral builders and tunnel diggers wasn't just a clash of male egos. It was sustained by networks of women who supplied materials, settled disputes, and preserved knowledge when wars or plagues disrupted guilds. The stained glass of Chartres might glow with biblical heroes, but its survival owes just as much to the unnamed women who scrubbed its panels with vinegar to prevent corrosion, or the Brewsters who kept ale flowing to thirsty masons during heatwaves. The next time you marvel at a medieval city's skyline, remember, it wasn't just a contest of spires and tunnels, but a tapestry woven by countless hands, many of them hidden in history's shadows, yet no less essential to the story. Medieval aesthetics weren't just about decoration, they were a battleground where beauty and function wrestled for dominance, each shaping the other in unexpected ways. Cathedrals, with their lace-like stone tracery and kaleidoscopic stained glass, seemed to reject practicality entirely in favor of divine spectacle. Yet every soaring arch and delicate spire served a hidden purpose. The ribbed vaults that dazzled the eye also distributed weight with mathematical precision, while gargoyles, those grotesque stone sentinels, doubled as ingenious rain spouts channeling water away from fragile walls. Even the seemingly frivolous flying buttresses acted as hidden counterweights, their graceful curves bracing the structure against relentless winds. What appeared to be pure ornamentation was in fact a masterclass in engineering disguised as art. Below ground, the tunnel diggers faced the opposite challenge. Their world demanded ruthless functionality. Passages had to stay dry, walls couldn't collapse, and every inch of space needed to serve a purpose. Yet even here, beauty found a way to seep in. In the underground cisterns of Constantinople, diggers arranged columns salvaged from ruined temples into symmetrical patterns, turning a utilitarian water storage system into a submerged forest of marble. Beneath Italian hill towns, escape tunnels often featured carved niches for votive candles, their flickering light guiding fugitives while transforming a grim necessity into something almost sacred. Even the humble brickwork of sewer tunnels sometimes bore subtle herringbone patterns, not for decoration, but because the angled layout strengthened the structure against shifting soil. The diggers understood that functionality didn't have to mean austerity. The most fascinating moments came when these two worlds collided. In the crypt of Canterbury Cathedral, normally a stark space of bare stone, masons surprised everyone by carving delicate foliage motifs into the capitals of support columns, a nod to the tunnel diggers' habit of marking their work with personal symbols. Over in Toledo, a secret underground synagogue featured ventilation shafts disguised as decorative rosettes, their floral designs filtering light and air while adhering to religious restrictions on imagery. These weren't just aesthetic flourishes, they were acts of quiet rebellion, proof that even in the most constrained environments, human creativity refused to be stifled. By the late Middle Ages, the boundaries between these rival philosophies began to blur. Cathedral builders adopted tunnel diggers' reinforced arch designs for hidden crypts, while diggers borrowed stained glass techniques to create prismatic light wells in underground chapels. In places like Mont Saint-Michel, where every inch of space was precious, the two approaches fused seamlessly. Spiral staircases doubled as structural supports, and drainage channels were etched with tidal charts. The result was an architectural language where nothing was purely ornamental or purely practical, where every element served multiple purposes across both worlds. This delicate dance between form and function left an indelible mark on how we build even today. Modern architects still grapple with the same tensions medieval craftsmen faced: how to make subway stations feel uplifting or skyscrapers resonate with meaning. The lesson etched into those ancient stones and tunnels is timeless. True ingenuity lies not in choosing between beauty and utility, but in weaving them together until they become indistinguishable. Whether in sunlight or shadow, the medieval city taught us that the most enduring structures are those that speak to both the eye and the hand, the soul and the soil. The Black Death didn't just ravage bodies, it shattered the very foundation of medieval labor, leaving cities scrambling to rebuild with hollowed-out workforces. For cathedral builders and tunnel diggers alike, the plague years brought an impossible choice: abandon half-finished projects or innovate ruthlessly to survive. In Florence, the Grand Duomo stood roofless for decades as skilled masons succumbed to the pestilence, their intricate designs gathering dust. Meanwhile, beneath the streets of London, tunnels meant for expanding trade routes became mass graves, their walls hastily whitewashed to contain the miasma of death. The rivalry between these craftsmen didn't vanish, it mutated. With whole guilds wiped out, survivors found themselves bargaining from newfound positions of power, their scarce skills now worth triple the wages. Cities desperate to revive their economies made shocking concessions. In Strasbourg, where the cathedral spire had stalled at 200 feet, the remaining masons negotiated unheard-of privileges: shorter workdays, guaranteed ale rations, even the right to refuse dangerous high-altitude labor. Tunnel diggers, once relegated to the shadows, became urban saviors. When Paris's Seine-side sewers clogged with plague debris, it was these soot-stained workers who cleared the blockages, their knowledge of underground currents proving more vital than any bishop's blessing. The balance of power had shifted irrevocably. A mason's chisel and a digger's pick now held equal weight in a world where manpower was more precious than gold. Yet from this chaos emerged breathtaking ingenuity. With traditional techniques rendered impossible by labor shortages, both groups turned to radical solutions. Cathedral builders in Prague began using prefabricated stone blocks, carved off-site by untrained laborers under the guidance of a single surviving master. Below ground, diggers in Siena engineered gravity-fed sewer traps that required minimal maintenance, a system so effective it's still in use today. The competition between them took on a desperate creativity. When Avignon's papal palace needed emergency repairs after the plague, its architects poached tunnel diggers to reinforce the foundations, adapting their shoring methods for above-ground walls. The plague's darkest legacy, though, was how it reshaped urban priorities. As death carts rattled through streets, cities realized towering cathedrals mattered less than functioning infrastructure. In Ghent, funds once earmarked for a new chapel stained glass were diverted to expand the underground water network, a decision that saved countless lives during subsequent outbreaks. Venice took this further, merging its cathedral and tunnel guilds into a single entity tasked with both spiritual and practical renewal. The message was clear: survival demanded honoring both heaven and earth. What emerged from the ashes wasn't just rebuilt cities, but a new understanding of craftsmanship's value. The handwritten memoir of a Burgundian mason captures this shift perfectly. We who survived ceased building for God's glory alone and began building for the living first. His words echo in the modest but sturdy parish churches that replaced unfinished cathedrals, their vaults low but their foundations deep. They resonate, too, in the plague-era tunnels beneath Orvieto, where diggers carved not just escape routes, but communal cisterns, monuments to collective resilience that still quench the city's thirst 7 centuries later. The rivalry between builders and diggers would continue, but never again would either side dismiss the other as mere laborers. The Black Death had taught them the hardest lesson of all. When the world crumbles, only those who master both heights and depths can hope to rebuild it. At first glance, the cathedral builders crafting delicate traceries and the tunnel diggers shoring up muddy passageways might seem worlds apart, but scratch beneath the surface and you'll find a hidden dialogue of innovation, where techniques forged in sunlight were adapted for darkness and underground solutions reshaped the skyline. Take the humble stone arch, a signature of Gothic cathedrals. While masons perfected its form to distribute weight across soaring vaults, tunnelers borrowed the same principle to prevent cave-ins, stacking bricks in identical curves beneath streets. The resemblance wasn't coincidence, it was theft in plain sight. Guild records from 15th century Bruges even show tunnel diggers paying fines for borrowing masons' templates, proving how fiercely these trades guarded and poached each other's secrets. The exchange flowed both ways. When cathedral builders in Lincoln struggled with swampy ground, they turned to the very men they'd once mocked, the mudlarks who'd stabilized Amsterdam's canals. These diggers taught them to drive oak pilings deep into the mire, a technique so effective it later underpinned Venice's marble palaces. Even the iconic flying buttress, those stone ribs propping up cathedrals, may owe its design to tunnelers' temporary support beams. Archaeologists in Cologne found 13th century tunnel shoring that matched the exact angle of the cathedral's buttresses, suggesting a quiet collaboration between rivals. Some of the most ingenious adaptations happened in plain sight. The intricate pulley systems hoisting cathedral stones, originally devised by miners to lift ore from deep pits. The stained glass artist's lead came strips, nearly identical to those used by tunnelers to seal underground cisterns. Even the masons' prized compasses found new life underground. Diggers repurposed them to map twisting passages with uncanny accuracy. The rivalry between these craftsmen wasn't just destructive, it was generative, forcing each side to evolve or be outdone. Nowhere was this exchange more vital than in disaster response. When Salisbury Cathedral's spire began leaning dangerously in the 14th century, it wasn't a mason who saved it, it was a well-digger named Thomas of Odiham who recognized the signs of shifting groundwater from his tunnels. His solution, a network of hidden drainage channels that still divert water away from the foundation today. Similarly, when the tunnels beneath York flooded in 1422, cathedral masons lent their mortar recipes to seal the breaches, mixing in crushed pottery, a trick they'd learned from repairing collapsed cloisters. What began as reluctant cooperation sometimes blossomed into full partnerships. In medieval Nuremberg, the Brotherhood of Stone and Shaft brought both guilds together to tackle impossible projects like the city's famed tiered well system. Cathedral stairs spiraled downward to meet ascending tunnel shafts, their converging designs creating a water-lifting marvel that serviced both the bishop's palace and the public fountains. Here, the line between sacred and practical blurred completely. The same hands that carved saints' faces also engineered valve chambers beneath the streets. The legacy of this technological barter still surrounds us. Modern earthquake-resistant buildings use diagonal bracing inspired by both flying buttresses and tunnel reinforcements. Subway stations from London to Tokyo employ ventilation systems adapted from medieval crypt designs. Even the fiber optic cables threading beneath cities today follow paths first mapped by those ancient diggers, their routes sometimes mirroring the vaults of cathedrals overhead. The lesson etched into these stones is clear: progress rarely walks a straight line. It's a tangled, collaborative dance where even rivals, when pushed by necessity, can build something greater than their sum. Walk through the nave of Chartres Cathedral, and every stone seems to whisper secrets. The sculptures adorning its portals aren't mere decorations, they're a meticulously coded language, where a lamb resting on a book symbolizes the gospel, and a dragon crushed underfoot represents vanquished evil. Even the cathedral's layout holds hidden meaning. The labyrinth embedded in its floor mirrors the spiritual journey of pilgrims, its winding path a physical metaphor for the twists of faith. These weren't arbitrary choices, they were a visual theology designed to educate the illiterate, turning walls into sermons and pillars into parables. Beneath the streets, tunnel diggers left their own cryptic language. In the quarries beneath Paris, miners carved simple but purposeful marks, crosses to signal stable rock, circles warning of weak spots, arrows pointing to exits. Some tunnels feature notches tallying work shifts, while others bear mysterious symbols resembling guild signatures or protective charms. Unlike the cathedral's grand narratives, these markings were pragmatic, born from the urgency of survival. A single misread symbol could mean collapse or suffocation, making their code as vital as any stained glass allegory. What unites these two worlds is their unspoken dialogue with the future. Cathedral builders embedded apocalypse prophecies in their gargoyles' rain spouts shaped like demons swallowing sinners, a stark reminder of Judgment Day. Tunnel diggers, meanwhile, scratched warnings for those who'd follow. Turn back here, etched near unstable chambers, or water comes where underground streams threatened. Both groups were storytellers, one crafting tales for the masses, the other leaving bulletins for their brethren. The most poignant symbols blur these boundaries. In Lincoln Cathedral's crypt, a stonemason carved a tiny, perfect rose, a signature, yes, but also a quiet defiance against the anonymity of labor. Beneath Edinburgh, tunnelers left star-shaped clusters of chisel marks, possibly representing celestial navigation or simply the human need to create beauty in darkness. These personal flourishes reveal the craftsmen behind the craft, not just anonymous workers, but individuals with fears, faith, and pride. Decoding these messages unlocks a medieval mindset far richer than textbooks suggest. When a cathedral's column bears a carving of a fox preaching to geese, A satirical jab at corrupt clergy, it reveals dissent simmering beneath piety. When tunnel walls display crude drawings of taverns or home hearths, they speak of longing for sunlight and family. The stones tell us what records never recorded, that even in an age of absolute faith and backbreaking labor, people remained stubbornly, beautifully human. These hidden narratives also expose unexpected connections. In Canterbury, a tunnel leading to the cathedral's crypt is marked with a fish symbol, early Christian code for Christ, suggesting diggers and clergy shared secret bonds. Beneath York, runic inscriptions appear alongside masons' marks, hinting at Viking laborers assimilating into Norman projects. The divide between sacred and secular wasn't always fixed. Sometimes it dissolved into collaboration, with each group borrowing the other's visual shorthand. The true power of these symbols lies in their durability. Centuries after their creators turn to dust, their messages endure, warnings still legible in torchlight, parables still legible in stained glass. They remind us that medieval cities weren't just built with mortar and muscle, but with layers of meaning, some meant to awe, others to guide, all meant to outlast their makers. To walk these spaces today is to eavesdrop on a conversation across time, where every mark, whether grand or humble, whispers, "We were here." The Renaissance dawned like a slow sunrise, its light gradually shifting how cities saw themselves and who they celebrated as builders. Where medieval craftsmen had competed to touch the divine or master the earth, a new generation of architects looked backward to ancient Rome and Greece, sketching columns and domes that rejected the Gothic obsession with height. The classical ideals of symmetry and proportion replaced flying buttresses as the ultimate test of skill. In Florence, Brunelleschi's dome for the cathedral wasn't just a feat of engineering, it was a manifesto, proving that mathematical harmony could outshine medieval grandeur. Suddenly, the stonemasons who'd spent lifetimes perfecting ribbed vaults found their expertise labeled old-fashioned, while tunnel diggers, once vital to urban survival, were recast as mere laborers in an age obsessed with clean, geometric streetscapes. Urban planning dealt the final blow to this centuries-old rivalry. As cities embraced Renaissance ideals of order, haphazard medieval neighborhoods gave way to sweeping boulevards and centralized piazzas. The chaotic dance between cathedral builders and tunnel diggers, where every new spire might destabilize a sewer and every tunnel could undermine a chapel's foundation, was now seen as messy, even dangerous. In Rome, Pope Sixtus V's ambitious replanning in the 1580s didn't just straighten streets. It buried entire medieval tunnel networks under orderly new avenues, literally paving over the digger's legacy. Over in London, the Great Fire of 1666 erased the tangled Gothic cityscape, replacing it with wider streets designed by surveyors, not craftsmen. The age of rival guilds negotiating each other's space was ending, replaced by top-down decrees from princes and popes, yet the craftsmen's influence refused to vanish entirely. Those classical palazzos rising across Italy, their foundations relied on medieval tunneling techniques to navigate unstable soil. The elegant new bridges of Paris still used the same ribbed arch designs perfected in cathedral crypts. Even the Renaissance's most celebrated innovation, linear perspective in art, owed a debt to the tunnel digger's meticulous spatial mapping. When Leonardo da Vinci sketched his visionary underground cities, he was borrowing from manuscripts passed down through generations of miners and masons. The rivalry might have faded, but its innovations had become the invisible scaffolding of a new era. The true testament to these medieval craftsmen lies in how their work adapted. In Antwerp, the last generation of Gothic masons carved classical motifs into their stonework, proving they could evolve with the times. Beneath Prague, tunnel diggers reinvented themselves as hydraulic engineers, maintaining the ancient cisterns that kept Renaissance fountains flowing. Their guild halls might have emptied, but their knowledge seeped into the bones of cities, waiting to be rediscovered. When Baroque architects later revived dramatic verticality in buildings like Rome's Trevi Fountain, they were unknowingly channeling the old cathedral builders' audacity. And when 19th century engineers confronted industrial pollution, they turned to medieval sewer designs for solutions. What ended wasn't the value of their work, but the world that had nurtured their rivalry. The cathedral builders and tunnel diggers didn't lose, they dissolved into history, their techniques so thoroughly absorbed that we forgot where they began. Walk through any European city today, and you're traversing their layered legacy. The subway beneath your feet descends from their tunnels, while the skyline above echoes their spires. The Renaissance might have declared their era over, but the stones themselves tell a different story, one where every age builds on the last, and even the fiercest rivals eventually become collaborators in time. Today's architects and engineers might work with steel and fiber optics instead of stone and mortar, but the age-old tension between soaring ambition and grounded necessity still shapes our cities. Look at any modern skyline where glass towers compete for height while subway lines snake beneath them, and you'll see the same dynamic that once pitted cathedral builders against tunnel diggers. The Burj Khalifa's record-breaking spire captures headlines, but it's the buried flood channels protecting Dubai's foundations that keep it standing. Just like in the Middle Ages, we're still wrestling with the same fundamental question: how to balance the visible symbols of progress with the invisible systems that make them possible. Consider the rivalry between star architects and civil engineers. When Santiago Calatrava designs a train station like the World Trade Center transportation hub, with its soaring oculus mimicking a dove in flight, critics argue the extravagant curves and skylights come at the cost of functionality, echoing medieval bishops who prioritized stained glass over sewer repairs. Meanwhile, tunneling projects like London's Crossrail face backlash for their astronomical budgets, even as they relieve pressure on aging infrastructure. The parallels are striking. Just as medieval guilds clashed over resources, today's urban planners debate whether to fund a flashy museum or a stormwater drainage system, knowing both shape a city's future in different ways. Yet history offers solutions hidden in plain sight. Take Barcelona's superblocks, pedestrian-friendly neighborhoods that echo medieval squares designed for cathedral gatherings, while their underground geothermal systems owe a debt to ancient canal tunnels. In Tokyo, engineers fighting rising groundwater repurposed a 13th century technique from Venice, using absorbent limestone walls to stabilize skyscrapers. The lesson: yesterday's rivalries forged tools we still need today. When New York's 2nd Avenue subway encountered unexpected bedrock, engineers didn't invent a new method. They adapted the polling plate system medieval miners used beneath Paris. The real breakthrough comes when these worlds collaborate. Oslo's Opera House, with its sloping marble roof inviting public walks, also conceals a tidal flood barrier beneath its foundations, a modern twist on Mont Saint Michelet's dual-purpose design. In Singapore, the Marina Bay Sands' iconic Sky Park isn't just a tourist attraction. Its weight helps anchor the building against monsoon winds, much like flying buttresses stabilized cathedrals. These projects prove that visibility and utility aren't opposites but partners. The medieval craftsmen who secretly shared techniques would recognize this spirit instantly. What's different today is scale. Medieval cities could afford mistakes. A collapsed tunnel might bury a crew, but rarely endangered thousands. Modern megaprojects carry higher stakes. When Boston's Big Dig tunnel leaks or a skyscraper's foundation settles, the consequences ripple across millions. That's why some firms are reviving an old idea: mixed teams. Engineering giant Arup now pairs height specialists with ground stability experts on projects, mirroring the ad hoc alliances between masons and diggers who saved Winchester Cathedral. The results speak for themselves, like Shanghai's twisty skyscraper, whose gravity-defying curves are only possible because its foundation mimics the interlocking arches of a Gothic crypt. The future might lie in embracing this duality fully. Amsterdam's underwater bike garages, which double as flood buffers, or Milan's vertical forest towers with roots in repurposed sewer tunnels, show how seamlessly beauty and function can merge. Even the materials we use echo medieval ingenuity: carbon fiber reinforcing concrete like iron rods once braced cathedral stones, while self-healing bioconcrete mimics the way lime mortar gradually fills its own cracks. The next time you pass a construction site, look closer. That crane lifting glass panels operates on principles a medieval winch inventor would recognize, and the slurry wall holding back groundwater owes its design to a 14th century miner's trick. The cathedral builders and tunnel diggers left us more than stones and passages. They left a blueprint for building civilizations. Their rivalry taught us that cities thrive not by choosing between heights and depths, but by mastering both. As climate change and overcrowding test our urban centers, their hard-won lessons feel more vital than ever. After all, the climate-resilient city of tomorrow won't be built by architects or engineers alone, but by those who remember that every gleaming tower needs its hidden foundations, and that the deepest innovations often come from the unlikeliest collaborations. Hollywood would have you believe medieval cathedral builders were saintly artists chiseling divine visions into stone, while tunnel diggers were grimy outcasts scrabbling in the dirt. But peel back the layers of myth, and you'll find a truth far more fascinating and far more human. Take the stereotype of the pious mason, patiently carving saints with calloused hands. Guild records tell a different story: brawls over wages, complaints about hangovers slowing work, even cases of masters skipping town with unfinished contracts. These weren't angelic craftsmen, they were skilled professionals negotiating deadlines and dodging debts like any modern contractor, and those so-called lowly tunnel diggers. Their work required mathematical precision that would stump most people today. Beneath cities like Nuremberg, they engineered gravity-fed water systems with slopes calculated to the millimeter, using nothing but weighted strings and intuition. Some tunnels featured ventilation shafts disguised as garden fountains, proving their creators understood airflow dynamics centuries before modern physics. Far from being uneducated brutes, the best diggers could read Latin construction contracts and sketch complex cross-sections, skills that put them on par with the architects they supposedly served. The myths get even murkier when you examine who actually did the work. While stained glass windows get credited to anonymous medieval artisans, tax rolls from York reveal glassmakers by name, women like Johanna Verg, who ran a workshop supplying cathedral projects across England. Similarly, tunnel crews weren't just anonymous laborers. Guild ledgers list specialists like Richard the Wallpacker and Matilda the Lightbringer, roles requiring years of training. These weren't interchangeable cogs in a machine, but respected experts whose signatures, literal chisel marks, still hide in the stones and tunnels they shaped. Perhaps the most persistent fiction is that these groups worked in isolation. In reality, cathedral builders and tunnel diggers constantly borrowed each other's techniques. When the foundation of Wells Cathedral began sinking, it was a tunnel engineer who proposed the radical solution: inverted arches beneath the floor, a concept borrowed from mine shoring. Conversely, diggers adapting cathedral scaffolding methods revolutionized tunnel safety, replacing rickety ladders with sturdy wooden platforms. Their rivalry wasn't a clash of high and low culture, but a dynamic exchange that pushed both crafts forward. The real insult to these craftsmen isn't just the inaccuracies, it's how the myths flatten their ingenuity into simplistic tropes. Reducing cathedral builders to pious drones ignores their cutthroat business tactics and occasional fraud, like the mason who sold relic mortar mixed with ordinary dirt. Painting tunnel diggers as mere muscle overlooks their innovations in cartography and material science. Both groups deserve to be remembered not as caricatures, but as the multifaceted pioneers they were, quarrelsome, brilliant, and endlessly resourceful in shaping the world above and below. Archaeological digs beneath modern cities have become time machines, peeling back layers of dirt to reveal the intimate world of medieval craftsmen. In a cramped tunnel beneath Norwich, researchers uncovered a leather worker's shoe still caked in 13th century mud, its toe worn through from years of kicking aside rubble. Nearby lay a wooden tally stick notched with marks, likely a digger's personal record of stones hauled, each groove representing another backbreaking load. These aren't just artifacts, they're frozen moments showing us the calloused hands behind the grandeur. Some discoveries rewrite history entirely. Beneath Vienna's Stephansdom, archaeologists found a trove of metal tools wrapped in oiled cloth, a medieval mason's secret stash. Alongside chisels and mallets were unexpected items, a set of brass calipers for precise measurements, and a wax tablet scratched with geometric diagrams proving these builders worked from sophisticated plans, not just rough sketches. Even more telling, charcoal sketches on tunnel walls in Cologne, showing humorous caricatures of grumpy bishops and lopsided cathedrals, a proof that these workers saw through the pretensions of their patrons while shaping their visions. The real revelations come from the smallest details. Dental analysis of skeletal remains in Paris's ancient quarry tunnels revealed grit embedded in tooth enamel, traces of stone dust inhaled over decades. At Canterbury, a single misplaced chisel mark on a hidden column base tells of a tired mason's momentary lapse, hastily corrected before the master inspector passed by. These flaws and fixations humanize the craftsmen far more than perfect finished cathedrals ever could. We're not just seeing their skill, but their exhaustion, their shortcuts, their quiet rebellions against impossible deadlines. Perhaps the most poignant finds are the accidental time capsules. In a sealed alcove under York Minster, excavators discovered a lunch basket from the 1400s, its contents perfectly preserved by limestone-rich groundwater. Inside, a hunk of coarse bread, a wedge of cheese wrapped in leaves, and a tiny wooden horse carved by a worker for his child. Nearby, someone had scratched a game board into the stone floor, its grid lines worn smooth by fingers during stolen breaks. These glimpses of ordinary life remind us that behind every soaring arch was a person who ached for home, who played games, who packed meals just like we do. The greatest treasure might be the voices recovered from the dark. In the quarries beneath Provence, laser scans revealed phrases carved into walls by candlelight, not just work records but personal musings. One reads, "Martin loves Alice," in shaky letters. Another laments, "The beer is sour today." Most haunting is a single word etched near a collapsed tunnel: "Run." These scrawls, often dismissed as graffiti, form the closest thing we have to medieval worker diaries. They transform anonymous laborers into individuals with inside jokes, crushes, and fears people who could never have imagined we'd overhear them centuries later. Technology is unlocking even deeper secrets. Spectral imaging on a scrap of vellum found in a Spanish tunnel revealed smudged fingerprints and wine stains alongside engineering notes, evidence of a master digger revising plans after a long tavern debate. In Germany, residue analysis on mortar buckets detected traces of honey and egg whites, proving old legends about secret strengthening additives weren't myths after all. Each discovery peels back another layer of the past, showing us that these rival craftsmen weren't so different from modern construction crews, proud of their work, frustrated by their bosses, and always innovating to outdo the competition. What emerges from the dirt isn't just a collection of objects, but a mosaic of humanity. The cathedral builder who signed his name inside a hidden boss stone, knowing only God would see it. The tunnel digger who painted a protective charm on a shaky wall, praying it would hold long enough to get home. These artifacts remind us that history wasn't built by legends, but by ordinary people with extraordinary perseverance. Their triumphs and troubles literally cemented into the foundations of our world. Every chisel mark, every fingerprint in dried mortar whispers the same truth. Greatness isn't forged in grand gestures, but in the quiet accumulation of days spent doing work that outlasts lifetimes. The rivalry between cathedral builders and tunnel diggers wasn't just a medieval drama, it was a masterclass in how competition can spark unexpected collaboration. Think of it like two rival chefs in the same kitchen. One specializes in dazzling desserts, the other in hearty stews. At first, they might resent sharing space, but when a banquet demands both sweet and savory, they're forced to combine their strength. That's exactly what happened in cities like Chartres, where masons and diggers clashed over resources until a collapsing foundation forced them to swap knowledge. The masons shared their mortar recipes to stabilize tunnel walls, while the diggers revealed underground water patterns that saved the cathedral's sinking nave. Their feud didn't disappear, it evolved into something far more powerful, mutual respect born of necessity. This dynamic holds a crucial lesson for modern challenges. When engineers in Amsterdam tackled rising sea levels, they didn't just consult hydrologists, they studied medieval peat diggers' techniques for managing soggy ground. Tokyo's flood control system, with its cathedral-sized underground cisterns, owes its design to centuries-old European crypt networks. Even Silicon Valley's tech rivalries echo this pattern. Apple and Samsung may battle in courtrooms, but their competition drives innovations like flexible screens and longer battery life that benefit everyone. The medieval craftsmen understood something we're still relearning. Progress isn't a zero-sum game. What made their collaboration work was the recognition that their goals overlaid more than they clashed. Cathedral builders needed stable ground, tunnel diggers needed precise measurements. Both relied on clean water and safe streets. Their rivalry became productive when they realized that a city's survival depended on balancing beauty and utility. In Bruges, this tension birthed hybrid marble storm drains disguised as decorative canals, bell towers doubling as watchtowers. Today's urban planners face similar dilemmas. Should funds go to a dazzling new museum or an invisible sewer upgrade? The answer, as medieval cities showed, isn't either-or. Barcelona's superblocks prove it's possible to merge green space with efficient transit, just as medieval squares hosted both markets and religious processions. The most enduring takeaway: specialization loses its power when it becomes isolation. Medieval guilds guarded their secrets fiercely until plagues or wars forced them to share. Modern industries often make the same mistake, hoarding patents or data while global problems like climate change demand collective solutions. But the cathedral builders and tunnel diggers left us a blueprint: compete fiercely on skill, but collaborate when stakes outstrip pride. When London's Crossrail project hit unexpected Roman ruins, archaeologists and engineers didn't argue over priorities. They redesigned tunnel routes together, preserving history while keeping the city moving. That's the medieval spirit alive today, recognizing that the best cities aren't built by winners of rivalries, but by rivals who become partners. Their stones and tunnels whisper a timeless truth. Greatness rises when we dig deep and reach high together. The echoes of hammers and pickaxes may have faded from medieval streets, but the legacy of cathedral builders and tunnel diggers is written into the very DNA of our cities. Their rivalry wasn't just about stone versus soil. It was a dynamic tension that forced both sides to innovate beyond what either could achieve alone. Like two sides of the same coin, their competition forged solutions that balanced aspiration with practicality, beauty with resilience. Today, when you admire the skyline of a modern metropolis or ride a subway beneath its streets, you're experiencing the culmination of their centuries-old dialogue. Consider how their innovations still pulse through urban life. The reinforced concrete supporting skyscrapers, a direct descendant of the ribbed vaults that allowed cathedrals to soar. The intricate web of fiber optic cables beneath sidewalks, a high-tech evolution of medieval water channels. Even something as mundane as a storm drain owes its design to the tunnel diggers who first mastered the art of controlling water's flow. These craftsmen didn't just build structures, they encoded a philosophy into urban landscapes, that a city's strength lies in harmonizing what rises above with what lies below. What's most remarkable is how their rivalry transcended conflict to become collaboration. The flying buttresses of Beauvise Cathedral only stood because diggers shared their knowledge of load-bearing arches from underground granaries. The precision of Renaissance city planning emerged from masons and surveyors borrowing tunnelers' mapping techniques. Their story teaches us that progress rarely comes from solitary genius. It's forged in the friction between competing visions, where sparks of creativity ignite. As we face our own urban challenges, climate-resilient infrastructure, affordable housing, sustainable transit, their example feels strikingly relevant. The modern equivalents of cathedral builders and tunnel diggers might be architects debating green roofs versus solar panels, or engineers weighing subway expansions against bike lanes. Like their medieval counterparts, these rivalries aren't obstacles to progress. They're its engine. The next time you pass a construction site, take a moment to appreciate the invisible lineage behind it, centuries of accumulated wisdom, passed down through generations of craftsmen who argued, adapted, and ultimately elevated each other's work. So let's remember these medieval rivals not for their conflicts, but for their shared legacy. The cathedrals still standing today did so because diggers stabilized their foundations, just as thriving cities relied on masons' designs to guide their growth. Their story isn't just history, it's a playbook for how we might build the cities of tomorrow. If you've enjoyed this journey through the stones and shadows of the past, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What modern-day rivalries do you see shaping our urban future? Drop your ideas in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden histories all around us. After all, every great city, whether medieval or modern, is built not just on stone and steel, but on the stories of those who shaped it.